All right, react, Andy. Uh, what happened to the canceled Twilight Princess sequel by Nayru? I've never heard of this before, so I want to see what's up.
In December of 2006, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was released. After the cel-shaded romp through the Great Sea of Wind Waker and the multiplayer madness of Four Swords Adventures, people were eager for a return to form. Twilight Princess was just that. GameCube owners were able to see their console out with one last epic Zelda adventure, and Wii owners were able to
Yeah, I
lock their
love
new
this game.
console in with an
This game
entire
is
Zelda game.
so good. Doesn't get enough credit.
Twilight Princess was a critical and commercial success. Critics praised the atmosphere, the temple design, and the bigger emphasis on it.
I feel the thing is too is that a lot of people nowadays write off this game because it's quote unquote like generic or bland. I don't agree. I don't know. I think this game is great. I think it deserved all the praise it got. People just don't give enough credit to this game anymore. I mean, there's a lot of people that love it, but I've seen a lot of people say that it's very generic as well.
A cinematic story. Players agreed. Twilight Princess is the second best-selling Zelda game of all time, only behind Breath of the Wild. This didn't go unnoticed by Nintendo, and particularly by Shigeru Miyamoto. Aside from Twilight Princess's critical and commercial success, Twilight Princess is to this day the favorite game of many Zelda fans. My co-narrator today, the venerated Tyler Townsend, is one of these people.
The affection for Twilight Princess was notable pretty much right off the bat, and when it came time for the Zelda team to start their next project, Miyamoto wanted to make their next project a sequel to Twilight Princess. Not a vague sequel linked only through story like Wind Waker is to Ocarina of Time, and also not a sequel that totally changes the style of gameplay, like the DS games.
Yeah, we get a direct
Miyamoto
sequel.
was thinking of Majora's Mask when he considered the Twilight Princess sequel. He thought of the way that Nintendo was able to take their already existing assets in Ocarina of Time and reuse them to tell a new story. In this way, the Zelda team was able to release an entirely new experience to Zelda fans, but without having to go through the long development cycle a new Zelda game usually entails. People already love Twilight Princess's world and gameplay, and so it seemed like another game using its assets would be perfect. So Miyamoto approached the Zelda team to brainstorm ideas. The team was naturally thrilled at the prospect, and it was not hard for them to come up with ideas. The world of Twilight Princess was well fleshed out, and there were a lot of directions that they could go.
Problems struck almost immediately. There seemed to be some miscommunication between Miyamoto and the Zelda team in terms of what the game was meant to look
Why am I
like.
not surprised?
Miyamoto wasn't looking for the next mainline Zelda. The idea of another Wind Waker or Twilight Princess sized game would be too ambitious even if it was reusing Twilight Princess's engines, or at least Miyamoto thought so. He was looking for, as he puts it in his own words, a side story.
He wanted a side story? Okay. I don't know. I think the game should have just had a good direct sequel. Why not? It had so much world building there with the Twilight Realm and everything else that they could have done it. I don't know. I don't understand why you would only want a side story.
The Zelda team, however, didn't seem to understand this and were pitching Miyamoto grand ideas that he describes as epic tales. This tension between Miyamoto and the Zelda team is something that, as you'll see, doesn't go away during the life of this project.
Oh, Miyamoto's demands? Oh, is another Star Fox Zero?
Anybody who knows about Miyamoto knows he has some very specific opinions on game design. And it would obviously be foolish to doubt Miyamoto considering his legacy, but there's an argument to be made that his ideas don't necessarily translate the cleanest to the modern day gaming industry.
That's what a lot of people don't. I mean, maybe a lot of people understand it now, but I swear, Miyamoto, he's a gimmicks-based game designer or something. he has to fit a gimmick into all of his games. And you see it with Star Fox Zero and a multitude of other games. Not all of them, but a lot of them as well.
Industry, at least not in every scenario. Miyamoto believes in a certain simplicity in his games, a focus on a central enjoyable mechanic and clearing out anything that might clog it up or get in its way.
That's good.
This is where Nintendo's story second, gameplay first ethos comes from. As Miyamoto puts it himself,
of course,
yeah, I
it's
prefer
also
that,
important to continue
usually.
creating epics. But I do not believe that an epic tale alone can make a great game.
True.
I mean, depending on what kind of characteristics are added to a game, the fundamental enjoyment behind it can get lost amongst all the gadgets.
This aspect undeniably still rings true in some ways today. Mario Odyssey is the truest conveyance of Miyamoto's principles that there ever was, but his ethos often clashes with series that tend to have a stronger focus on story, or at least series people wish had a stronger focus on story. The simplification of the Paper Mario series comes to mind, and Miyamoto's
Paper Mario.
demand for the
Never heard
developers
this
to
one
seek the
before.
use of original characters, instead being forced to use minimally customized standard characters from the Mario universe.
Oh my
The
goodness.
struggle between
How do they
Miyamoto
screw
and
up
his
Paper
team
Mario
can
that
be well
bad?
imagined. The staff pushing for probably very cool ideas for a follow-up or extension to Twilight Princess's story, and Miyamoto shooting them down for being too complicated. He spent a while pondering, as Miyamoto
Of
puts it,
course.
over this project. In the end, Miyamoto fell back to his traditional process of focusing first on a gameplay hook. He told the team that the Twilight Princess sequel would need to use the Wii Zapper.
That's exactly what I'm saying. He fits gimmicks into his games. If it's talking about crossbow training, then that's not surprising. Why? Why would you have a direct sequel to one of your most beloved franchises and one of the most beloved games? Why would you use a Wii Zapper as the main control? How does that make sense for you to do that when you're just trying to make a direct sequel that would be a side story? What's the need in fitting in a gimmick? It's like, okay, clearly, Star Fox Zero. It's like, I don't know, I'm not going to get into Star Fox Zero, but geez, why are they doing this? Gimmicks crap.
the team was, as I'm sure you can imagine, a little shocked and confused by this.
I mean, I think a lot of
At
people
risk
would be
of
like,
reading into the situation too much.
Direct
they
sequel?
were likely fairly disappointed. Imagine getting the chance to come up with the idea for a follow-up to a Zelda epic, only to be told shortly after that it needs to focus on the Wii Zapper. I imagine it would be frustrating. Miyamoto
Yeah, I'm
recalls
sure.
that when he broke this
I think a
news
lot
to
of
the
people
team,
would be.
He was essentially killing all the ideas they were working with until then.
Yeah.
Satoru Iwata, who was pitching the project to Nintendo
Why would you use a
America,
frickin'
recalled this
zapper?
tension between Miyamoto and his team.
Well, at the beginning of the project, even I sensed an air of disagreement, or at least a lack of understanding amongst some of the staff.
Yeah,
Miyamoto
Wii
essentially
Zapper.
wanted to make the first-person
Crossbow
Zelda
training.
game that he'd wanted as far back as Ocarina of Time, and he wanted it to be a simple, straightforward affair. The game was to show off how simple and fun the Wii Zapper could be to use, something that anybody could pick up and play.
Yeah, but not in a main story. I mean, there's a reason they probably went with this crossbow training game and not a main story. They took what they had, most likely, and then they decided this isn't going to work for a main story. You can't, this is the problem that happened with Star Fox Zero. I keep mentioning it. That they wanted to make the central focus the controller, and it didn't work. It's like, why does Miyamoto insist on gimmicks and controller schemes like this? I don't understand.
To the people working on it, it probably felt like this game was becoming less of a Twilight Princess sequel.
Yeah,
and
I'm
more
sure.
of a demo for a plastic accessory. The team didn't feel good about this idea, and some of them even felt
wouldn't
that
doubt it.
selling a Wii Zapper demo using Twilight Princess assets might feel deceiving to customers.
Seeking to end the dispute, Miyamoto made them a proposal.
I proposed to them that we make a working prototype and ask our test players to play and let us know their impression. If they told us that it wasn't fun, we would stop development right there.
Fortunately for Miyamoto, and perhaps unfortunately for the team, the prototype was well received.
Nintendo of America
Yep.
got together a group.
Not surprised.
A number of die-hard Zelda fans. But none of them said, "What? This isn't Zelda?" And they started really enjoying the game. And we knew that it was a go.
Man,
Those working
Imagine
on the
working
game
on that.
may not have been convinced. And according to Iwata, even Nintendo of America had doubts, but Miyamoto was settled. The Twilight Princess follow-up would be a very simple first and third person affair, using the Wii Zapper and assets from Twilight Princess. However, the team would not settle for making essentially a simple tech demo, and even with their new restrictions, they were still pushing for the game to have an involved story and deep mechanics. In the end, Miyamoto cracked down again and laid out restrictions.
this is what makes me so frustrated too, is that all of the sales that they had, it was like 6 million or 7 million, something like that, for Twilight Princess, would indicate a sequel, considering that they built the world up and they had all these characters involved. Wind Waker got sequels, got Spirit Tracks, it got Phantom Hourglass. Why not create a sequel for Twilight Princess? And he's the reason that it essentially got canceled. It's mind-boggling to me that this man single-handedly was the reason that Twilight Princess 2 didn't happen because of a stupid gimmick. Oh my goodness. He's a great designer. He's made a lot of good games, no doubt about it. But this is so bad. Like, this is so stupid on his end. I don't even understand it. That's just crazy to me.
For this matter, I intentionally ordered our team a number of don'ts in the game's development. Like, we cannot include anything unnecessary, or we cannot make a movie, or the player should be able to complete one stage within 3 minutes.
He went from making a sequel to just straight up making an on-rail shooter that you could play in an arcade. I don't understand. Jeez.
Why was Miyamoto so strict in terms of how simple the game would be? Well, he tells us why.
The fact is, the journey is really the reward. And there are times when game creators use well-made rewards as the excuse. For example, if someone invents an ending that they're really proud of, that they just think is fantastic, then they might end up settling for a less than splendid journey. But that's a definite case of getting your priorities mixed up. So, with Link's crossbow training, I really saw it as my responsibility to make sure that the creators didn't get too caught up with the reward, and focus instead on making the journey itself the fun part.
The developers
Why? It went from being a sequel to just an arcade game. I don't even understand that philosophy. I'm not a game designer, but that doesn't make, like, I don't get it. The team's direction was to make a Twilight Princess sequel, and he turned it into an arcade shooter. And then that's the quote he talks about, saying that should be I don't even know what he was trying to say. Honestly, I don't understand.
even after coming to terms with the fact they wouldn't be developing the Twilight Princess sequel they thought they were, still pushed to make the game more sophisticated and deep than just a simple Wii Zapper shooting game. They pushed against Miyamoto even further, and they were able to get some concessions. Miyamoto's dedication to having the game as simple as can be was to the point that he didn't even want the game to have bosses.
How's this even a side
Yet
story?
the team pushed and pushed, and eventually were given permission to have a boss. Just one
There is
boss,
no story.
which ended up being the extremely memorable rematch against Star-Lord. They won a few other concessions as well, like some levels having diverging hidden paths. The final product would feel like they took the Hidden Village shootout from Twilight Princess and made a short game out of it. This wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
You remember the hidden village in Twilight Princess? Well, I personally love that spaghetti western-like setting.
This
And we
area was
recreated the
awesome.
scene because we wanted people to be
I
able
wish
to
they did more
enjoy
with
in
it.
FPS games. I also thought that if you were able to
This
use
felt
the
like
Wii
such a
Zapper with
side
it, it
thing.
would be even more fun.
Instead of his standard bow, they would outfit Link with a repeater crossbow, so he could shoot his way through familiar Twilight Princess locales. The idea of a gun was debated, but ultimately decided against, since Link with a gun would seem pretty inappropriate to Nintendo. Also vetoed by Nintendo was an idea from Miyamoto to have Link get teleported to the future in a Terminator-style
What?
that would justify his use of a gun.
What is
It seems a
that?
bit odd considering how focused Miyamoto was on making the game.
How
as
does that
simple as
even
possible,
fit?
but
What?
maybe it brought the developers some comfort to know that even Miyamoto was having his ideas shot down too. It was debated whether the crossbow should be rapid fire or not. It didn't seem realistic, but they decided to implement it anyways because it
This
was
is so
more enjoyable.
stupid.
Ultimately, like Miyamoto wanted, the game would end up being bereft of story. It was very short and very straightforward.
Yeah, like
The
what?
level to which this game had been detached from the original idea of a Twilight Princess sequel can be perfectly exemplified in the following quote by Miyamoto regarding the name of the game.
Since it is a kind of introduction to FPS games, we were originally thinking of calling it Introduction to Wii Zapper. But then we decided that people might get that confused with Introduction to Wii, and we didn't want that to happen.
The game was so far from the Majora's Mask style sequel it began as that it didn't even originally have Legend of Zelda in its name. It seems like, as far as Miyamoto was concerned, the Zelda aspects were merely window dressing around the primary purpose of the game as a tech demo for the Wii Zapper. It would end up with the name Link's Crossbow Training, and it was released in Japan in May of 2008. This game, which started its life as a sequel to one of the most beloved Zelda titles, now served as not even a game on its own, but as a pack-in title for the Wii Zapper. It was met with mixed reception, a far cry from the critical acclaim of the game it was based on. People cited it as being far too short, fairly unambitious, and some found the game to handle poorly with the peripheral that it was made for. In the broader Legend of Zelda discourse and fandom, Link's Crossbow Training is mostly forgotten. When it is brought up, it is often with the level of derision.
Yeah,
and
it's
Zelda
stupid.
spin-offs have a spotty record, and Link's Crossbow Training doesn't help dispute that.
I mean, it's a fine game and all. It's just, why would you go from that to this? The game was perfectly fine as a direct sequel or a side story, whatever they were planning on. That would have been 1,000 times better than an on-rail shooter that Sega could have made on a Naomi in an arcade. Yeah, that's, of course it's going to be viewed in disgust because it's wasted opportunity and potential.
I often wonder how Miyamoto feels about the fact that the game was criticized for the very restrictions he put in place. Nevertheless, the game does have a small but dedicated following of people who enjoyed it. I am one of those people. When I play Link's Crossbow Training, I can't help but to feel that the game has a lot of care put into it. It feels like the game could have gotten away with much less effort, and yet the environments are lovingly designed, the enemies are perfectly picked and are translated creatively to a first and third person shooting game atmosphere, and the boss battle against the Star Lord is genuinely excellent. The game is kind of good despite itself. And it doesn't really surprise me this is the case. It is so obvious that the team behind Link's Crossbow Training wanted to be making the next Majora's Mask, a game that still influences people to this day,
Such a good
not
game.
A Wii peripheral package.
Imagine
But instead of letting this desire go
getting
to waste,
that.
they used it to polish what they were
Similar
allowed
to
to
Majora.
do to a shine, and to fight with Miyamoto for every last scrap of depth that they could win from him. Hi dude.
Just sounds like awful to work with him if he's gonna tell them, hey, I want this, and then go from that to arcade. It's just, man, I don't even know. I love the guy for what he's done for gaming or whatever, but what even is this?
Genuinely enjoy Link's Crossbow Training. I think the Zelda team did an admirable job considering the restrictions they were under. All the same, one can't help but wonder what would have come of the Twilight Princess sequel that never was.
Would have been badass.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps me see what kind of content you enjoy. I'd be keen to make more videos on other cancelled Zelda projects if you guys do end up liking
You should.
this one. Also, big thanks to Tyler Townsend for helping voice this video, and to Connor from Zelda Beyond for providing the Miyamoto voiceovers. Links to both channels below. As always, stay safe out there. Keep your crossbow raised and your ears open. The Arbiter's Ground is dangerous to navigate.
Wow. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that the crossbow training was supposed to be the Twilight Princess sequel. And it doesn't surprise me because, as I was saying previously, Miyamoto's a gimmicks-based guy, it seems, on a lot of his stuff anymore. And I just can't believe that they scrapped it for an arcade shooter. I've said it a million times at this point, but geez, that is insane to me. Well, either way, this guy made a pretty good video on it. You should definitely go watch it. Name's Nayru. Give him a like, whatever you gotta do. So, yeah.